25 years old and then a sergeant in the Army. I had deployed to Iraq for Operation Iraqi Freedom. From time to time, I volunteered to travel on IED-infested roads to conduct supply missions for U.S. and allied forces and local Iraqi population as well. But on January 6th, for the first time, I was more afraid to work at the Capitol than my entire deployment to Iraq. In Iraq, we expected armed violence because we were in a war zone. But nothing in my experience in the Army or as a law enforcement officer prepared me for what we confronted on January 6th.
That was U.S. Capitol Police Officer Gonell yesterday during his testimony in front of the House Select Committee, describing his horrific experience on January 6th and actually comparing it to his time serving in Iraq. Gonell described scenes like something out of a, quote, medieval battlefield as a violent mob tried to breach the Capitol and interrupt the certification of the election result on orders from the former president, or as Officer Gonell's colleagues described him, the hitman, Donald Trump. We're back with Jamal and Paul. Paul, I just need you to expand on a Capitol Police officer saying that January 6th was worse than anything he saw in Iraq.
Well, he broke it down. I mean, you know, over 1 million people have served in Iraq. I've served in Iraq, and very few of them have ever been in direct hand-to-hand combat. None of us faced anything that looked like that. I dealt with crowd control. I dealt with big groups of people when I was doing patrols, but we never had that. What we all saw on TV and we've been seeing on the replays, that was terrifying. And it was overwhelming, and they didn't know if they had any support. And I think it really cut to the core of the idea that America is about teamwork. Whether we're talking about Simone Biles or the officers yesterday, we got to work together. We got to stick together, especially when the stakes are high. And yesterday was an example of true American heroism. It was disgusting. If you're not angry about that, you're not paying attention. But it also shows that American heroes are stepping up every day. I say on my podcast all the time, I pull the Mr. Rogers line, look for the helpers. When things are bad, look for the helpers who are going in. We saw 4 of them yesterday, 4 that our kids can look up to, and 4 that unfortunately are going to have to hold the line in many days to come because, as we've talked about on this show, January 6th is not the end. It's the beginning, and it's the biggest national security threat we face, and we're going to need a lot more people like Officer Gonell in the days ahead.
I mean, the sad sort of counter to that, Jamal, is that we saw them for what they are, fact witnesses of what actually happened on January 6th, but they were trashed last night on the news channel that if you will, the 30% who believe the big lie and are more inclined to attack Officer Gonell than thank him. They happen to intersect with people who don't want to take the vaccine. They also happen to intersect with people who attack Simone Biles. Where do we go from here in this sort of bifurcated reality?
Well, you know, I was told that blue lives matter, or is it that blue lives only matter when it comes to the oppression, subjugation of black people and other brown people? Because it seems like we hear a whole lot about what the police should mean in our society, what authorities should mean when it's in the context of brutalizing other people who don't look like that faction that you just described, because they're here to disrespect, dishonor, and completely disregard these officers as long as they don't go along with this inane plan that they had in mind. I mean, I couldn't agree with Paul more. January 6th was not the culmination. It was not the end. It was truly the beginning, and that sentiment has carried over. And I think what's so hurtful beyond what this has done to our democracy, to the soul of this country, what's so hurtful about this is that there is an intent to never hold the right people accountable who are responsible for these scenes that we're seeing here, that were responsible for an officer losing their life, that were responsible for these officers being left with lifelong trauma. I mean, they're heroes and they have done their duty far and beyond what they're called for. But don't think for a moment that this is something that just goes away after this testimony. I mean, this is something that's going to stick with them forever. And to know that there is no real push, or at least on one side, to never hold the people accountable who are responsible. And I'm not talking about the people pushing that gate there. I'm talking about the people who put all of this in motion. I just feel awful for them because they're not going to get the justice that they truly deserve.
Paul, we talk all the time about the rise of extremism in institutions we traditionally hold up, right, and look to. We talk about it in the military and law enforcement. How do you see this hearing as potentially breaking through? I mean, can it? Do you think it has any chance of doing that?
I do. I mean, it's kind of a moment like when we started seeing coffins coming home from Iraq, or you started seeing real combat footage. It changes when you hear personal narratives, when you understand there are people behind the uniforms, when you understand their pain, and they put color behind what seems to be a political talking point. I mean, this is also, we've talked about this before, Nicole, this is a strategy by extremists and by right-wing attack people and the machine. You know, they continue to attack certain types of people who step forward to express heroism, and they're not attacking white people. Like, let's be honest about this here, right? They're attacking Simone Biles, they're attacking Officer Grinnell, they're attacking Officer Dunn. This is not an offshoot. This is a strategy, and they continue to compound it in part because it animates that extreme part of this movement, which I will say every time I'm on your show is the #1 national security threat we face right now. It's not Al-Qaeda, it's not ISIS, it's not Iran, it's domestic extremism. Osama bin Laden never took over the Capitol. These people did, and many of them are still out there. I say it on my Twitter feed. If you're upset, you can help. The FBI is looking for these people right now. There are 11 videos of people that are out there that are still on the streets. They're out there, and we can help the FBI. We can lock them up. Either you're with us or you're against us, and many of these people are against us. They're against Team America. They're against the officers, and they need to be held accountable, locked up, put on trial, and put away.
I see all those videos, and I retweet them. I know you do, too. Jamel Hill, Paul Rykoff, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. We will be back after a short break. Don't go anywhere.